The flashes of cameras were nothing new to Selena Gomez. After 2 decades in the spotlight, she had mastered the art of the red carpet, the precise angle of her chin, the subtle shift of weight that made every dress fall just right, the practiced smile that looked genuine every single time. But tonight, at the Metropolitan Museum of Art's annual gala, something felt different. Maybe it was the dress itself, a vintage-inspired piece that her new stylist, Marcus Chin, had practically begged her to wear. It's Schiaparelli, he had insisted during their final fitting, his eyes gleaming with the kind of excitement usually reserved for archaeological discoveries. From their new collection, but with this incredible retro pattern that's absolutely perfect for this year's theme of American nostalgia. The dress was admittedly stunning, ivory silk covered in a delicate pattern of intertwining roses and vines in shades of deep burgundy and forest green, with occasional glints of gold thread catching the light. What Marcus didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the moment Selena had first seen the dress on the rack, her throat had tightened with an emotion she couldn't quite name. There was something achingly familiar about that pattern, something that tugged at the edges of her memory like a half-remembered dream. Now, as she posed for photographers, her phone buzzed in the tiny clutch pressed against her side. Usually, Selena ignored any notifications during red carpet events. It was an unspoken rule of celebrity etiquette. But something made her pause between photos to sneak a glance at the screen. It was a text from her cousin Miranda, and attached was a photo that made Selena's heart skip a beat. OMG SEL, the message read. Grandma Lupe is freaking out right now watching your red carpet live stream. You're not going to believe this. Selena opened the attachment, and suddenly the world around her, the cameras, the crowds, the chaos of the Met Gala, seemed to fade away. The photo showed her grandmother's living room, specifically the wall behind the worn leather armchair where Grandma Lupe had told stories throughout Selena's childhood. The wallpaper, installed sometime in the 1960s and never changed, featured an intricate pattern of roses and vines in burgundy and green, with faded golden accents that had once caught the light just so. The exact pattern she was wearing. Her hands trembled slightly as she zoomed in on the photo, comparing it to the fabric of her dress. It wasn't just similar, it was identical, down to the specific way the vines curved and intertwined. How was this possible? She knew Schiaparelli was known for drawing inspiration from unexpected places, but her grandmother's wallpaper? The coincidence seemed too perfect to be real. As if in a trance, Selena found herself stepping away from the photo line, ignoring the confused calls of her publicity team. She needed a moment to think, to breathe, to remember. Because suddenly, standing there in her haute couture dress that matched her grandmother's 60-year-old wallpaper, Selena was beginning to recall something else, a story Grandma Lupe had once told her about her own dreams of fashion design, dreams that had been set aside but never forgotten. The story had been shared on a quiet Sunday afternoon, with sunlight filtering through those very same roses and vines, but Selena had been too young to understand its significance. Now, as another camera flash brought her back to the present moment, she realized this couldn't be a coincidence. There had to be more to this story, much more, and she was going to find out what it was, even if it meant turning the fashion world upside down in the process. The next morning, headlines across fashion blogs and entertainment sites blazed with variations of Selena's mid-gala mystery exit. Some speculated about a wardrobe malfunction, others suggested a celebrity feud, but none came close to guessing the truth. Selena sat in her grandmother's sun-drenched living room in Grand Prairie, Texas, still wearing her travel clothes from the hasty flight she'd taken at dawn. Grandma Lupe's hands trembled as she pulled a dusty leather portfolio from beneath her bed. The portfolio itself looked like a relic from another era, its corners worn smooth by time, its surface etched with the kind of patina that only decades of safekeeping could create. The old woman's eyes sparkled with unshed tears as she carefully undid the tarnished brass clasps. "I never told you the whole story, Majida," she said, her voice soft with memory. "About the summer of 1963, when I worked at Neiman Marcus in Dallas." She pulled out yellowed sketches, dozens of them, each more extraordinary than the last. They were fashion designs, rendered with the kind of skill that comes from raw talent combined with desperate passion. And there, on page after page, were variations of the rose and vine pattern, some in different colors, some with slight alterations, but all unmistakably the same design that now graced both the walls around them and Selena's viral Met Gala dress. I was just a seamstress there, Lupe continued, smoothing a wrinkled page with tender care. But every lunch break, every spare moment, I would sketch. The other girls, they would bring magazines from Paris, from Milan. We would all dream, but I was the one who couldn't stop drawing. She paused, her fingers tracing the lines of a particularly detailed sketch. That's where I met her, Isabella Schiaparelli Berenson. Selena's breath caught. Elsa Schiaparelli's daughter? Lupe nodded, a bittersweet smile playing at her lips. She was visiting the store, looking at their collection of her mother's archived pieces. She saw me sketching during my lunch break. She was kind. Interested. She spent an hour looking through my portfolio. Her voice grew quieter. She was especially drawn to this pattern. Said it reminded her of her mother's work, the way it combined the natural with the surreal, the way the vines seemed to dance. What happened then? Selena asked, though something in her grandmother's tone suggested she already knew this wasn't a story with a happy ending. She offered to take my portfolio to Paris. Lupe's hands clasped together tightly. Said she would show it to the right people. I was young, so young. And scared. My parents. She shook her head. They were good people, but they didn't understand. A Mexican girl from Texas, designing haute couture? It seemed impossible. When my father got sick 2 weeks later, I saw it as a sign. I wrote to Miss Berenson, told her to forget about me. I never knew if she received the letter. I took the job at the bank, married your grandfather, and... She gestured to the walls. I put the pattern here, where I could see it every day. My little piece of Paris in Texas. Selena's mind was racing. If Isabella Berenson had received the portfolio, if it had somehow remained in the Schiaparelli archives all these years. But there was something else nagging at her, something about her grandmother's story that seemed to connect with another piece of information just beyond her grasp. Her phone buzzed, a message from Marcus, her stylist. Selena, you need to see this. The designer of your dress, Marie-Claire Rousseau, just gave an interview about her inspiration. She mentioned finding an old portfolio in the Schiaparelli archives, but she doesn't know who it belonged to. She's trying to find the original artist. Selena looked up at her grandmother, who was still lost in her memories, gently touching the sketches that had captured her dreams 6 decades ago. This wasn't just a coincidence anymore. This was a story waiting to be told, a recognition waiting to be given. And Selena knew exactly what she had to do next. The Schiaparelli atelier in Paris was exactly as Selena had imagined it, an elegant blend of historic grandeur and modern innovation, housed in a stunning mansion at 21 Place Vendôme. What she hadn't imagined was the chaos her arrival would cause. Word had somehow leaked about her connection to the mysterious vintage portfolio, and fashion journalists had gathered outside like birds on a wire, their cameras poised and ready. Marie-Claire Rousseau, the designer responsible for Selena's Met Gala dress, met them in a sunlit studio filled with sketches and fabric swatches. She was younger than Selena had expected, perhaps in her early 40s, with sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. The moment she saw the leather portfolio in Selena's hands, those eyes widened with recognition. Say impossible, she whispered, reaching for it with trembling fingers. This is the original. Selena watched as Marie-Claire carefully opened the portfolio, her grandmother's precious sketches now laid out beside their modern counterparts on the designer's desk. The similarity was undeniable, but what caught everyone's attention was how Lupe's original designs went far beyond the rose and vine pattern. There were evening gowns that seemed to defy gravity, suits that blended masculine and feminine elements in ways that felt startlingly contemporary, and accessories that could have walked off a modern runway. These are revolutionary, Marie-Claire said, her accent thickening with emotion. Even by today's standards, these designs, they are ahead of their time. And in 1963? She shook her head in amazement. Your grandmother, she was not just talented. She was visionary. But it was what they found at the bottom of the portfolio that changed everything. Tucked beneath the last sketch was a yellowed letter, never sent, dated just a week after Lupe had written to Isabella Berenson withdrawing her designs. The letter was from Isabella herself, urging Lupe not to give up, offering her a position in the atelier, promising to sponsor her visa. It had arrived at Neiman Marcus just days after Lupe had quit. Selena felt tears welling up in her eyes as she read the letter. Her grandmother had never known how close she had come to achieving her dreams. The weight of that near miss, that almost was, felt almost unbearable. But Marie-Claire wasn't finished. She pulled out her tablet, swiping through images rapidly until she found what she was looking for. "Look at this," she said, turning the screen towards Selena. "These are the sales figures since your Met Gala appearance. The rose and vine pattern has become our most requested design. Fashion blogs are calling it the Gomez effect. But it's more than that." She stood up, pacing the studio with growing excitement. "What if we did something unprecedented? Not just a single dress, but an entire collection. Lupe, the lost legacy. We could feature your grandmother's original designs, reimagined for today but staying true to her vision. And..." She paused for dramatic effect. "We want your grandmother to be part of the design process. To finally have her moment, 60 years later." Selena's heart raced at the possibility. But there was something else she needed to know first. "The original portfolio," she said carefully. "How did it end up in your archives?" Marie-Claire's expression softened. "Isabella Berenson never gave up hope that your grandmother would change her mind. She kept the portfolio in her personal collection, separate from the official archives. When she passed away in 1999, her note specifically requested that these designs be preserved, with instructions that they should only be used if the original artist or their family could be found." She smiled. It seems Isabella believed in destiny. Just then, Selena's phone lit up with a video call from her cousin Miranda. The camera showed Grandma Lupe sitting in her familiar armchair, surrounded by those roses and vines that had started it all. Selena's hands shook as she turned the phone toward Marie-Claire. It was time to make a 60-year-old dream come true. The transformation of Grandma Lupe's living room into a design studio happened so gradually that Selena couldn't pinpoint exactly when the change occurred. The familiar leather armchair remained, but now it was surrounded by dress forms, bolts of luxurious fabric, and digital tablets loaded with design software that Lupe had mastered with surprising speed. The wallpaper that had started it all became a daily source of inspiration as a team of Schiaparelli's best seamstresses and pattern makers worked alongside the woman they'd come to call Madame Lupe. What amazed everyone wasn't just Lupe's original designs from the 60s, it was how quickly she adapted to modern fashion, blending her vintage sensibilities with contemporary trends. Her hands, which had spent decades processing bank transactions, returned to their true calling with an eagerness that brought tears to Selena's eyes. Every morning, Lupe would wake up early, her sketch pad already filled with new ideas before the rest of the team arrived. "You know what's funny, Majida?" Lupe said one evening, as she and Selena shared tea between fittings. "I used to think that giving up my dreams was my sacrifice for the family. But now I wonder if maybe life knew better than I did. Back then, I would have been just another young designer. Now..." She gestured to the mood board where her original sketches hung alongside their modern interpretations. "Now I have 60 years of living, loving, and observing to pour into these designs. Each piece tells not just a story, but a lifetime." The collection was kept under strict secrecy, but rumors still swirled through the fashion world. The hashtag Loop's legacy trended whenever Selena was spotted visiting her grandmother's house, and fashion magazines ran speculative pieces about the mysterious Texas grandmother who had inspired Schiaparelli's most talked-about design in years. But it was during Paris Fashion Week that everything changed. Marie-Claire had insisted that the collection needed a preview, something to build anticipation for the full launch. They chose a single piece, a gown that reimagined Lupe's rose and vine pattern in a way that no one expected. Instead of the classic burgundy and green, the pattern was rendered in glow-in-the-dark thread that only became visible when the runway lights dimmed. The vines seemed to come alive, dancing across the fabric like bioluminescent creatures in a midnight garden. The video of the runway show went viral instantly. Fashion critics called it a perfect marriage of heritage and innovation. But it was the behind-the-scenes footage that captured hearts worldwide. Lupe, watching from backstage, tears streaming down her face as 6 decades of deferred dreams bloomed into reality before her eyes. That night, back in their hotel suite, Lupe showed Selena something she'd never shared before, a small notebook, its pages yellow with age, filled with sketches of dresses she'd designed in her mind while working at the bank. Next to each design was a note about who she'd imagined wearing it: her daughter's wedding dress, Selena's first red carpet outfit, special occasions that had passed without these designs ever leaving the page. "I never stopped designing," Lupe admitted softly. "I just did it in secret, in the quiet moments between everything else. Like those roses on my wall, my dreams never really faded. They just waited for the right moment to bloom again." As if on cue, Selena's phone buzzed with a notification. Anna Wintour herself had just posted about the preview, announcing that Vogue would be featuring Lupe in their next issue. The headline would read, "The Grandmother Who Revolutionized Schiaparelli, a 60-year fashion fairy tale." But as Selena looked at her grandmother, she realized that this wasn't just a fairy tale. It was a testament to the dreams that live in all of us, waiting for their moment to shine. And sometimes, just sometimes, those moments arrive exactly when they're meant to, even if it takes 60 years and a chance encounter with a familiar pattern to make them happen. The day of the full collection launch dawned crisp and clear in Paris. The venue, the historic Palais Galliera, had been transformed into a living timeline of fashion history. One wing showcased Lupe's original sketches from 1963, another displayed the evolution of her designs through the decades hidden in her private notebook, and the central hall waited, ready for the revelation of Lupe, the Lost Legacy collection. But the most significant transformation wasn't in the palace, it was in Lupe's old living room back in Texas. The famous wallpaper had been carefully removed, not to be discarded, but to be preserved in a special installation at the Schiaparelli archives. In its place was a hand-painted mural depicting scenes from Lupe's journey: a young woman sketching at Neiman Marcus, a mother drawing designs by lamplight after her children went to bed, and finally, a grandmother standing triumphant on a Paris runway. The show itself was unlike anything the fashion world had seen. Each piece told a story that spanned generations. The opening look was a modern interpretation of the bank uniform Lupe had worn for 30 years, transformed into a sculptural masterpiece with hidden pockets containing miniature sketchbooks. The rose and vine pattern appeared throughout the collection, but never the same way twice, sometimes subtle, sometimes bold, each iteration carrying a different emotional weight. As the models walked, a voice echoed through the palace, Lupe's voice, recorded over several months, telling stories about each design. She spoke of the dress inspired by her quinceañera, now reimagined with smart fabric that changed color with the wearer's movements. She described the suit she'd dreamed of wearing to her first day as bank manager, now updated with elements of both power and poetry. Each piece was a marriage of what had been and what could be. The final look brought the room to tears. It was a wedding dress, but not just any wedding dress. It was the one from Lupe's notebook, the one she'd sketched for Selena years ago, imagining a future where her granddaughter might wear her design. Now, as Selena herself walked the runway in that very dress, the roses and vines shimmered and moved, telling the story of 3 generations of women who never stopped believing in beauty. But the real surprise came after the show. Marie Claire announced the establishment of the Lupe Gomez Scholarship for Delayed Dreams, a fund that would support fashion designers who had put their artistic ambitions on hold for family obligations. The first recipient? A 68-year-old grandmother from Mumbai who had been designing saris in her spare time for 40 years. The wallpaper pattern that had started it all became known as the Lupe Rose, and was inducted into the permanent collection at the Museum of Modern Art. Fashion historians began researching other lost legacies, seeking out designers whose dreams had been deferred but not defeated. Selena's Instagram post of her grandmother teaching a master class at Parsons School of Design became the most liked fashion photo of the year. 6 months later, Lupe sat in her new studio in Paris, surrounded by young designers eager to learn from her unique perspective. On her desk sat a framed piece of the original wallpaper, next to a photo of her younger self at Neiman Marcus. "You know," she told her students, her fingers tracing the familiar pattern, "some people say I lost 60 years. But I didn't lose anything. Every year was part of the design, every experience a stitch in the fabric. We are all works in progress, being sewn together by time and circumstance. The key is to never stop adding to your pattern. That evening, as Lupe FaceTimed with Selena to discuss their upcoming joint interview for Time magazine's Icons of Reinvention issue, she glanced at the mural in her old living room, now visible through her granddaughter's camera. The painted figures seemed to move in the Texas twilight, their stories flowing together like threads in an eternal tapestry. The roses and vines that had once confined her dreams had become the very pattern that set them free. Abuela, Selena said softly, using the childhood name that now carried so much more meaning, do you ever wish things had happened differently? That you'd gotten Isabella's letter back then? Lupe smiled, picking up her sketchbook, not the old one filled with memories, but the new one brimming with designs for the future. Majida, she replied, sometimes the most beautiful gardens take the longest to bloom. And look at us now, we're not just telling my story, we're helping others write their own. Besides, she added with a wink, how many grandmothers get to say they became fashion icons alongside their granddaughters? The roses on her latest design seemed to dance across the page, weaving past and present into something entirely new. Something that reminded everyone who saw it that it's never too late for a dream to find its pattern. Tell us in the comments what part of this story impressed you the most. If you liked it, please like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next videos. See you in the world of incredible events.